ask you something, you can come in before. I'm Rishwin, who's on Hasgeek AV, who will play the talk. We'll take the cue from Rishu as well. So when he says over to the talk, Rishwin will play the talk. So if you want to, so you can play it free. Yeah. We'll take the cue from. Rishwin will play the talk. So if you want to, so you can play it free. Yeah.
Is there a delay somewhere? Is there a delay or an echo?
Yeah, there's some weird delayed echo.
There you go. Hey, Jan, is it at your end? Could you just check?
Yeah, maybe I had the YouTube window open at the same time, so I just closed that. That was maybe causing some.
YouTube is delayed. So yes,
yeah.
So that's the problem. Okay.
No worries. All right.
Okay. So
let's wait for folks to come in. Sorry, Jan, go ahead.
Yeah. So we are live now, so we can start in 2 minutes, I think. Which means we are live on YouTube. That's what it means.
All right, let's get started. So welcome everyone. Great to have folks on this live chat. So today is the first talk that we're going to have on privacy as risk assessment and risk mitigation project, hosted by RootConf in collaboration with Privacy Mode. Now let's quickly going to touch upon what Privacy Mode is. So Privacy Mode is a program at Hasgeek over here where we talk about technology and all the policies related to data protection and privacy from consumer and manufacturer standpoint both, right? I'm Rishu, I'm your host for today. I am a technology leadership consultant at Boston Consulting Group. And along with me, we have Jan. Jan comes with distinguished experience of almost 2 decades across multiple companies such as Yahoo and Aerospike and a whole lot more, and he's in Borneo. So you're going to hear from him in a while. Before we start, quick word about the project. So as and when user data is becoming more and more commonplace, is getting more and more distributed across various companies and various firms for various technical use cases, as when we're moving more towards digitization, there are new and new compliances that are coming up. And a lot of these organizations have to ensure that they are compliant when it comes to sharing user data, given how much of a concern privacy is in the current ecosystem and landscape, right? If you look at a very simple example, GDPR was something a lot of organizations have to work on based on my own experience as well. With companies such as LinkedIn and Visa, we had to ensure that almost decades worth of data had to be made compliant through and through, because there's no window on customer data as such when these compliances are being met, and they have certain legal ramifications as well. There's an upcoming PDP bill horizon as well, which makes it very imperative for organizations to assess their privacy preparedness through the prism of data risk, given the amount of major uh, leaks, data breaches that have become commonplace in past half a decade or so. I think we all have a certain element of risk when our data gets exposed, primarily as and when sensitive industries such as fintech are now moving towards account aggregators. They're also moving around, let's say, doing lending. A lot of non-financial players who are new into the field are now coming in, and more of people's personal and financial data is being distributed, which makes some of these compliances and how organizations need to and what all they can do as fast as they can in a very shift left way possible to meet these compliances so that they don't get left behind in the product spectrum. Now, through this project, let's call it PRAM. It's a word we would love to call it because it's quite a long name without an abbreviation. What we want to do is we want to kind of have participants slowly become aware to design organizations top to bottom, how to manage privacy risk, how to manage data at a scale, how to do more and more shift left of security validations, giving their consumers maximum amount of trust as and when consumers are going to entrust their data into their hands. Now, with that pretext, I'll quickly give a much more detailed introduction for Jan. Jan Hecking is a chief architect at Borneo. This is where most of the meat of the talk is going to be around the work he's been doing at Borneo. Again, he's a distinguished career, almost 2 decades across the industry as an architect with some of the big names such as Aerospike, Yahoo, and multiple more. And what he's going to primarily talk about is the shift left and how to fast track some of these compliance requirements across organizations. Before we start the talk, how we usually go with most of the Hasgeek and RootConf policies, please leave your questions in the comments, both on the YouTube chat window, right? And if you're joining us via Zoom in the Zoom window as well. At the same point in time, post the call, Jan and I will be taking questions. Feel free to raise your hand, feel free to come on air, ask us questions. We'll be super happy to answer both of them. Before we get started, quick plug about RootConf, though I believe most of us already here are regular participants. Started in 2012 as a DevOps and an SRE practice. RootConf has now spent more than a decade across the industry, right? Bringing practitioners together to talk about not just existing, but also emerging trends now. From DevOps, we've come to DevSecOps. We've started branching out into MLOps, into cloud ops, into data ops and privacy, right? And our editions are usually have been organized in Hyderabad, Pune, Delhi, pretty much all over the country. And our goal is to bring the industry practitioners together so that we all can learn from each other. And with that out of the way, over to the talk. And looking forward to interacting with everybody post the talk as well. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Jan. I'm currently the chief architect at Borneo. And here to the right, you can see a picture of myself with my daughter on Borneo a couple of years ago, one of our family vacations. So Borneo is a startup based in Singapore, but a large part of our engineering team is actually based in India. We have been building what we call the guardrails of the data economy since 2019. And what do we mean by guardrails of the new data economy? So both myself as well as our CEO and founder Prithvi have been working at large-scale startups like Yahoo, Facebook, and Uber prior to starting Borneo. And at these places, we saw firsthand how these companies were amassing large amounts of user data and the inherent value in that data, but also conversely the risk associated with that data. So, for example, if sensitive data, user data got leaked, can potentially harm the reputation of the company and erode user trust. Now, these companies were, comparatively big and had large security teams and had, the resources and the skills to build out custom solutions to protect the data of their users and make sure that it was protected adequately. But really, what we have set as our mission, at Borneo is to kind of build tools that empower companies of any size to protect their customer data and to improve user trust. So while with the move to the cloud, every company nowadays is a data company, collecting large and rapidly growing sets of data. Not all startups have the same sets of resources, skills, or tools to build their own custom security solutions. And oftentimes this leads to what we call privacy debt, where potentially sensitive data is collected, but is not secured adequately. The right security measures are not often put in place, and this can lead to data breaches. It can lead to other mismanagement of the data, which in turn can cause erosion of user trust, especially if some of the data becomes public. So the solution that we have built at Borneo basically allow our customers to gain real-time visibility, first of all, into their data sets. So at the heart of Borneo is basically what we call our inspection engine. Inspection engine is capable of ingesting large amounts of data from various sources through a set of connectors and is able to inspect that data to detect any kinds of sensitive information. So we call this like sensitive info types. So examples would be passport numbers or credit card numbers, bank account numbers, but also just personal names, postal addresses, or really any other kind of personally identifiable information, PII, or financial information, or also healthcare or medical related data. So, gaining visibility is oftentimes the first step to understand where sensitive data is stored and, what is the right way to protect such sensitive data. So with the help of Borneo, security teams can more easily meet their customer data privacy obligations, even with limited resources. Today, I wanted to talk about one example of, how Borneo was able to help a customer of ours with a particular data or privacy data challenge. So this customer is a large Indian fintech startup. They have been around for several years, and they offer their own prepaid credit cards as well as nowadays digital wallets. And because they're handling such sensitive financial information, they have to comply with what's called the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or short PCI DSS. So that is a large or a set of security best practices and security measures that any company that wants to process credit card data needs to comply with. And depending on your the volume of your transactions, you may have to undergo annual audits to prove that you are complying with these regulations. But really, similar challenges apply to any other kinds of regulation, be it the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, the GDPR, or similar laws in California, CCPA, PDP here in Singapore, or the upcoming regulation around sensitive data in India as well. So when it comes to managing compliance with such regulations, we can really break down that process into three kind of high-level steps, and I like to call them descope, de-risk, and document. So the first step in this process really is to identify which systems that make up your data infrastructure really handle the data that falls under this regulation. So in the case of PCI DSS, this would be cardholder data, so the actual credit card number, the expiry date, as well as the 3-digit or 4-digit verification code and the cardholder name. So any system that stores or processes cardholder data would need to be considered in scope for PCI DSS and would have to comply with the numerous security requirements. So there are about 200 plus security controls that are specified as part of the PCI data security standards. So, that then is the second step. So in order to mitigate the risk of handling such sensitive data, you have to implement all of these security measures to ensure that this data is stored and processed securely and is not, abused. And last but not least, it's not enough to just implement the required security measures. You also have to document, if and how all of these security measures have been implemented, or other compensating controls. So, especially these last two steps, can be quite resource-intensive tasks, depending on the size of the cardholder data environment. So really this first step of descoping is imperative because any system that you can prove not to contain any cardholder data would not fall under the scope of PCI DSS and therefore would not require the same level of security controls to be put in place as specified under PCI DSS. So really descoping is crucial in this process. But once again, you have to be able to document to a PCI auditor, for example, that the systems that you want to take out of scope, that they really do not contain any cardholder data. This Indian fintech company we're working with, we're already processing credit card data. So they were already compliant with PCI DSS, but they were processing such data in an on-prem system, which they had built over the years. And in order to solve, a growing set of new use cases, and to make use of all the benefits that the public cloud brings, they are rapidly expanding the operations into the cloud. And now the challenge that we're facing is that they had to be able to prove to their PCI auditors as part of their annual audit requirements that all of that new data infrastructure in the AWS cloud did not contain any credit card data and was therefore out of scope for PCI compliance, because otherwise they would have to implement all of the same security measures across all of their cloud infrastructure, which would have been a very involved process. So they started by looking at their primary data stores in the cloud, which was a fleet of RDS MySQL instances. And we're using Borneo to inspect the data in these MySQL instances. And so basically what happens is Borneo will ingest data from every single table in each of these RDS instances, and will inspect that data to determine what sensitive information, if any, is stored. So basically it will determine for each column what is the info type of that column. So that could be an email address, or it could be an IP address, or it could be a timestamp, or of course it could be a credit card number, an expiry date, or even a validation CVV code. So that's exactly what this team wanted to prove, that their RDS MySQL instances do not contain such data. So after performing the scan, which took just a couple of days, they had all the data, all the metadata about all of the sensitive info types, and were able to slice and dice that, see exactly which of these tables were containing sensitive information, and then in the end also produce a detailed report about the kinds of sensitive information contained in these RDS instances. And these reports actually did show that there was no credit card data in any of these MySQL instances. So with that, they were able to go to the PCI auditors and convince them, that these systems were out of scope for PCI DSS compliance. But unfortunately, not all was good, because they had also used Borneo to scan their S3 buckets. So they had dozens of S3 buckets and storing hundreds of thousands of terabytes of data in them. And unfortunately, within a few hours of starting these sample scans, Borneo had detected some credit card numbers in one of these buckets. So that was a problem, because now they knew that they had credit card data in at least one of their S3 buckets, and they needed to find out why and clean up that data, because none of these buckets were supposed to contain any cardholder data. So when Borneo first detected credit card data, it immediately raised an alert and also filed a ticket in the customer's Jira. And so this ticket contained quite a bit of context already, like specifically which file or which set of files had contained the data. So it looked like these were some application logs that ended up in S3. But these files were quite large. So as you can maybe see in the screenshot, just this one example, there was a wallet log file which contained more than 4 gigabytes of data. So initially the engineering team, was struggling a bit to pinpoint exactly where in this file, the credit card numbers were, found. Since Borneo had not detected a lot of credit card numbers, enough to be a problem, but not really, a large amount. But still, in order to pinpoint the system, the problem, the source of the problem, what the team did next is they again used Borneo to do a much more detailed full bucket scan. So initially they had only run sample scans, which just sample a small set of data from each bucket to just get a general idea of what kind of sensitive information might be included in the bucket. But now they were running a full bucket scan, and these scans generated a very detailed result of a list of findings with every single token that was detected, including the line number, as well as some other information about the context, like some keywords that were found close to the match token and that indicated the type of match, as well as like column names in the case of like CSV files, for example. And these detailed findings helped the engineering team to locate the credit card numbers in the files, and then based on the specific log entries to also determine the root cause of what was causing the credit card numbers to get locked. So as you can see here in this screenshot, what had happened is that one of the systems was expecting credit card numbers to be passed as an integer number. But instead, the system was receiving the numbers as a formatted string, and that was causing a number format exception. And it looks like this was some sort of like error message from an ORM system or something like that. So the engineering team was able to to pinpoint that and suppress these kinds of logs going forward. So, going forward, these logs will no longer contain credit card data. So all of this work had actually been done, as part of a trial that this company was running with Borneo. In total, it took about 3 weeks, and the main outcome for our customer was that they were able to fast track their PCI compliance. So Borneo was able to generate these reports and detail list of findings within days, whereas otherwise it might have taken the team weeks to produce the required documentation to convince their PCI auditors to take their AWS cloud infrastructure out of scope for PCI compliance. Since then, the team has entered into or has started using Borneo's commercial version and are regularly using Borneo as kind of a general privacy observability tool to monitor their data environment in the cloud. So they have by now established a baseline, so they have a good idea of what information is expected in every single data store. And whenever Borneo finds any sensitive information that does not match their established baseline, Borneo will generate an alert, either send them an alert in Slack or raise a ticket in Jira. And with very minimal effort, the security team can stay on top of their data security, even as the application engineering teams are adding new resources. Borneo will automatically detect new resources, new data stores as they're being added, and automatically start monitoring them. Going forward, what this team is next thinking about is how can they take this this privacy observability and kind of apply it to their whole entire application development lifecycle. So instead of just detecting such issues where sensitive data is ending up in logs only once it hits production, why not scan the logs of pre-production systems like a staging or a QA environment or even development environments, and look for such sensitive data there, so that issues can be detected early and remediated before they become a production issue. So we like to call this application data privacy management. And it's just one of a suite of solutions that Borneo offers. So from privacy observability to solutions for data investigations. For example, once you have detected a breach and want to know the impact of it, as well as PCI, GDPR, CCPA compliance solutions, as well as a next-gen DLP. So in addition to monitoring your cloud infrastructure, Borneo also has a set of connectors for enterprise applications like Slack and GDPR, Slack or Jira or Google Drive. And so Borneo can also monitor data being exchanged through these enterprise applications and can look for sensitive data as well as application secrets or passwords, for example, and alert the either the security team or the compliance officers, depending on the specific use case. I hope this gave you a good idea of what it takes to kind of achieve PCI compliance at a very high level, and how Borneo can help with this as well as with other data security challenges. So thanks all for listening, and happy to answer any questions you might have about Borneo, about the tech stack. Also, we are hiring for our team in India. So if any of you are looking for new opportunities to work with, large data sets and exciting set of technical challenges, feel free to reach out. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot for that talk, Jan. And for everyone who's listening in, we have the man himself, Jan, over here to field any questions that we may have from audience. Before we quickly get started, first up, Jan, this looks really amazing. Having worked with multiple clients and having been a part of, down in the trenches, I can attest to the fact how big a concern data privacy scanning and continuous, security scanning a problem this entire thing becomes for most of the industry. So this looks amazingly well done. Something that I think is very plug and play. While we are waiting for questions from the audience, I probably have certain curious questions of my own being a practitioner. So one of them was that, as you said, that we can go ahead and do sample scanning of, some of the data. We can run full length scans as well, right? The question here is that usually when teams try to move fast, typical DevSecOps model, or if there are new fields that keep on getting added, right? So teams maintain a separate data catalog sometimes as well. Teams may keep on adding newer fields. So how does Borneo get updated or get wind of these new fields altogether? Is it that it gets connected to a data catalog? Is it that data catalog has to be pushed to Borneo because it has a catalog of its own? Is it like a rule-based engine? How does that work? If you could tell us a little more in detail.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Rishu, and great to be here and talk in this forum. So yeah, as you rightly mentioned, like with modern companies having lots of data in the cloud, new data sources are being added, tables are being extended, and it is really difficult for security teams to be on top of all of that, because typically the application development team, the product team, is much bigger than the security organization. And product requirements keep changing, and due to that, also the data environment keeps changing. And security teams are used to being very reactive, just reacting to problems as they come up. So what we're really trying to do is to give them tools to kind of stay on top of that, to get a good understanding of visibility of all the data that the company collects. And coming to the technical details. So since data sizes in the cloud are just enormous, and especially the rate of change, if you just look at some transactional tables where companies, millions of users are transacting all the time, it's kind of impossible to do a full scan continuously on all of the data. Even keeping the data sizes in S3 in mind. So we've focused on kind of providing a good trade-off between gaining enough visibility and understanding of the data sets while also being cost efficient and resource efficient. So we're doing a lot of intelligent sampling, so not scanning every single record that gets updated. But talking about structured data, especially now, like your typical MySQL database, or it could be like a Snowflake table as well, or any kind of structured data. So we do regular sample scanning on those tables as well, and we do get the table schema. When that changes, we can detect that during the regular sample scanning. And so we can detect that, for example, maybe a new column was added to an existing table. So then we do as next step, the deep data inspection. So we're not just looking at the metadata. The metadata, the column name in some cases might already be indicative of what kind of data might be stored in the column, but you increasingly also have kind of a mix of structured and unstructured data. You might have a MySQL database, but you have a JSON-B column in there, so you have like a rich data set, not just a single value inside that column. So just looking at the column metadata, like the column name, might not be sufficient. It might just say like event data or something like that, which doesn't really tell you what kind of data is actually contained within there. So we actually look at the data itself. We run it through our inspection engine, and we discover what is the actual data. Like, is it just timestamp? Is it maybe user information like an email address, or something possibly even more sensitive? And for each table, we kind of keep Now we keep a schema of each table, not just the actual table schema, but like the table schema that we have detected, the in depth based on our inspection engine. So when new columns are added and we detect that the new column, for example, contains sensitive information that's not existing or that was not previously existing in the table or is not part of the table's baseline, then we will, Bonnie will go ahead and raise an incident and notify the security team, either sending them an alert via Slack or raising a ticket in Jira or just sending it into their Splunk or other SIEM system so that the security team can then react on that. And the second part of the question you were asking about integration with data catalog. So we actually recently launched an integration with Data Hub. So that's the open source data catalog originally from LinkedIn, but now there's a couple of commercial vendors. What we do there is we sent that same kind of information about the detected info types into the data catalog. So, for example, if in your data catalog you have an entry for a particular table, and we detect that one of the columns in the table contains bank account numbers, for example, Bonnie will then make a suggestion in the data catalog saying this table or this column seems to contain bank account numbers. And then it's up to the data custodian, so the team that owns that data, to confirm whether that's an accurate assessment or whether it's an incorrect assessment. Maybe Borneo misdetected something, and that information will again flow back to Borneo. So we get the feedback of whether detection that Borneo has made is correct or not based on the judgment of the data owner.
Got it. Thanks for that. Another question that just came to my mind is that usually what happens is that, as you said, right, with structured data, it's a slightly different thing as compared to unstructured data on S3 buckets. And you also talked about how expensive full table scans can get. That definitely is there. But is there a way that Borneo can actually do incremental snapshot scans? So usually, for example, let's say if I have a huge database, it could be Espresso. I mean, it could be any let's say MySQL, where I'm taking incremental snapshots. Can Borneo go through the incremental snapshots and scan them on, let's say, a nightly basis when the snapshots are taken and quantify them, saying that, okay, I'm going to gate this because the snapshot is not clean enough to go into the data store? Is there any such?
Yeah, so we don't operate on snapshots at the moment. We operate, or we like in the case of MySQL or other relational databases, we sample data directly out of the table itself. Mm-hmm. It really depends a bit on the connector. For example, we do have support for S3 to detect new files or new objects being added into an S3 bucket, and to kind of focus on scanning new objects that are being added. But even there, we see like in some of our big customers, the rate of change, like the number of objects being added to S3 buckets, can still be so huge that it's infeasible or not cost effective to sample or to scan every single file. So even then we still have to kind of apply sampling on top of that, and maybe only look at every 10% of all new objects being added into a bucket.
That makes sense. And coming down to the rate of change, right? So usually what has happened is that over the years, what used to be your security testing, penetration testing, a lot of security validations that used to happen have been moving more and more left into the entire DevSecOps pipeline, mm-hmm. right? Like, for example, now there are CI/CD pipelines that will essentially run SonarQube or checkmarks or any other code scan, and they'll just simply flag the code at the pull request level itself, saying that, oh wait, we are looking at something that could be a potential threat based on certain signatures. Now that is code, which means that there's an asset that's running on it. But how much of this shift left can Borneo introduce as of today? That is one question. And what is it that the team at Borneo is targeting in terms of data moving forward as well? And I understand code versus data are two very different things, because code is still a deployable quantity. Data is more a dynamic entity because it keeps flowing in.
Yeah.
But just want to understand how much of that shift left is possible today versus what is it that the Borneo team is targeting?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So yes, we are focused mainly on data. So we don't do static code analysis or anything like that at the moment. But really, we want to help the security team understand where their data privacy risk lies. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of shift left, what we currently do, or could do, is basically look at data flows before those applications reach the production state. So one kind of proof of concept we've done in the past is looking at API data, so inspecting data that is being exchanged by an API, either data sent to the API, like it might be a user's browser who uploads some sensitive information to a web service API, so we can interject or intercept that data and inspect to see what kind of data is being submitted, and then detect over time if there were any changes, if the API suddenly starts collecting new user data that was not previously being collected. And conversely, also in the reverse direction, like what data is being transmitted by that API back out to the user, or in the case it might be between two different systems. So there's several ways you could go about doing that inspection. You could either have like an SDK running inside the application. Think of something like New Relic, which has like an agent running inside your application and kind of monitors the performance of your application. So similarly, we could interject, intercept API calls inside the application and just monitor the data. Another approach would be to have something at the network level to kind of intercept the packets between the client and the application and do the inspection at that level. So it kind of depends on how far left you want to go. So this could be something that could be running like in an automated CI environment where you can do like automatic capture of the network traffic and analyze that. Another option would be to look at the log files that are getting generated as part of the test run, and then to see if there's any sensitive data in those application logs. So there's various approaches. We're kind of in the evaluation stage right now, talking to a lot of customers, trying to find out where their most pressing needs are, and trying to find a solution that would work across our largest part of our customer base.
Sounds great. Thanks for that. And to be honest, I'll be keeping an eye on for future releases from the Borneo team. I think we don't have a lot of questions from the audience, so I think we'll quickly apply the finishing touches here. And Jan, once again, thanks. It's been hugely educational, hugely informative, knowing what the team at Borneo is building. And as we talked before, it definitely solves a very, very real problem, something that at least I have seen almost on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, thanks.
And yep. And for folks who are tuning in or who are going to be watching this once this goes live, this, as we said, this is one of the first talks in PRAM, right? But we have a lot more incoming. Next 1 month, we're going to have 3 talks from Razorpay, right? And the details for those are going to be shared on the Hasgeek social media platform, as well as our website, hasgeek.com, really soon. So if you haven't already, just keep an eye on those, and we'll be looking forward to catch you at some of those talks and listen from you as well. And with that, I think we're going to call it a wrap. Once again, thanks, Jan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Hope everybody has a great weekend moving forward.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Bye.